Imagine a vehicle so compact it could hide behind a hedgerow and be missed by artillery spotters, yet so rugged and cunning in its design that it turned the very act of reconnaissance into a form of battlefield armor. The title calls it a slow British tank, but the machine we're about to meet was neither a conventional tank nor truly slow. It was the Dameler Scout Car, popularly nicknamed the Dingo, and while it wasn't built to slug it out with enemy armor, in the hands of the right crews and under the right doctrine, it acted like an unstoppable fortress, small, elusive, and stubbornly survivable. The story begins not on a battlefield, but on a quiet factory floor in Coventry, 1939. Picture the Dameler works, rows of polished metal, the faint tang of machine oil undercut by an odd, lingering trace of luxury leather, leftover from the company's pre-war life making high-end cars. Into that bright, orderly world rolled something that looked almost comically modest. An armored box on wheels, surprisingly low to the ground. It was no Churchill or Valentine. It was little enough to make engineers frown, small enough to pass unnoticed under a blast of radio chatter. And yet every design decision that went into this compact vehicle answered a single urgent problem. Britain needed a reconnaissance vehicle that could get close to the enemy, see what was there, and come away again with crew and information intact. By 1938-39, the British Army faced a pressing shortage of fast, low-profile reconnaissance machines. The brief was radical, a very low silhouette. Under 6 feet was the goal, ultimately refined to just under 4 feet 11 inches. A vehicle weighing only a few tons, capable of cruising faster than civilian roads demanded, with four-wheel drive and independent suspension to cross rough ground. It had to be quiet, controllable, and simple enough to be produced in large numbers. That mix of stealth, speed, and simplicity drove the Dingo's DNA from the first sketch to the last rivet. The initial prototype came from the Birmingham Small Arms Company, BSA, and the engineering lead, Sid Shellard, would become the Dingo's principal architect of practicality. Daimler's luxury car division took the design into production, smoothing it into something manufacturable for wartime. The vehicle's nickname, Dingo, stuck the way nicknames do, quick, taunting, and carried by soldiers rather than generals. Officially, it remained the Dameler Scout Car, but colloquialism matters in war. Crews preferred the bite of Dingo. By May 1939, the first orders had been placed, and by the end of the year, 22 vehicles had passed acceptance trials and moved toward service. That small start would swell into thousands. 6,626 Dingos rolled out in total, produced even while Coventry itself staggered under the Blitz, with manufacturing dispersed and adapted rather than halted. At first glance, the Dingo's physical specifications seemed to trade brute force for a different kind of strength. Its height, roughly 4 feet 11 inches, gave it an extremely low profile. It carried only light armament and lacked a turret. Instead of heavy side armor, protection was concentrated frontally, where danger was most likely to arrive. The front plate reached up to 30 millimeters in thickness, enough to withstand small arms and shrapnel, and to give crews a fighting chance if they ran into enemy fire. With a two-man crew optimized for observation and radio operation, the vehicle's layout removed all the clutter that wasn't strictly necessary for recon. Compact, efficient, and purpose-built. What made the Dingo feel like an engineering trick was its drivetrain. It used an H-drive layout, a configuration that in plain language puts the drivetrain components across the vehicle's belly in a flat plane. Think of the H-drive as a flat backbone that keeps the underside smooth, allowing for better ground clearance and less vulnerability to obstacles or rough terrain snagging under the chassis. On top of that, the Dingo employed a fluid flywheel paired with a Wilson preselector gearbox. If the H-drive is the skeleton, the fluid flywheel and preselector gearbox are the muscles and nerves that make movement seamless. The fluid flywheel works like a hydraulic coupling. Instead of relying on a clumsy clutch that bites and slips, it allows power to transfer smoothly, absorbing shocks and stutter when a wheel catches and then frees itself. The preselector gearbox lets the driver choose the next gear in advance and then engage it nearly instantly, no long clutching or painful shifts. The net effect for operators was a vehicle that started, stopped, and reversed with surprising quietness and precision. That quietness mattered. Reconnaissance is half about what you don't do, making noise, drawing fire, or advertising your presence. The Dingo's transmission and engine combination made it far less conspicuous than other vehicles with clattering gearboxes. Paired with independent suspension for each wheel and run-flat tires that allowed crews to keep going even after punctures, the Dingo could cross terrain where heavier vehicles bogged down and could escape hits that would have stopped less thoughtfully engineered machines. And escape was central to its doctrine. The Dingo was not meant to engage, it was meant to observe, report, and withdraw. British reconnaissance units developed a simple, almost theatrical routine: drive forward to a position of advantage, use the cramped but well-placed vision slits and periscopes to find targets or obstacles, make radio reports that would shape the decisions of commanders farther back, and then do something unusual: withdraw, not by awkwardly turning and retreating, but by reversing out at speed. Because the heaviest armor was concentrated at the front, crews were trained to take the enemy with the frontal plate facing them, even while retreating. The Dingo could back away at nearly 40 miles per hour, a remarkable capability, allowing it to peel off from danger while still keeping the best protection between the crew and the threat. Those theoretical advantages were tested across the war's varied theaters. In France, the rapid German advance of 1940 and the chaotic withdrawal to Dunkirk proved both the fragility of small units and the stubborn utility of well-designed machines. Many Dingos were abandoned in the evacuation simply because crews had to prioritize men over machines on the beaches. Yet where they survived, their mobility and compact size allowed them to slip through gaps and survive shelling that bogged down larger scout vehicles. North Africa offered the Dingo the kind of open terrain that makes you think first of speed and second of disguise. In the desert, the vehicle's low profile combined with its handling to create a near-vanishing act. At certain times of day, it could merge with the undulating horizon and disappear from visual and even limited optical detection. Regiments such as the 11th Hussars, part of the 7th Armored Division, the Desert Rats, used the Dingo to probe enemy lines, run rapid patrols across the sand, and to deliver exacting reconnaissance that larger formations could then exploit. The Dingo's driveline and suspension allowed it to keep moving over soft sand where heavier machines would sink. Drivers learned to use momentum and wheel control like a dance to keep the vehicle skimming across dunes. Enemy gunners often couldn't track such a low, fast target against a bright desert sky. Its edge blurred the way a mirage does. In Italy, the landscape changed to narrow mountain tracks and tight passes. Here, the Dingo's compactness paid off in a different way. It could take a track too skinny for larger cars, slip around a corner too sharp for a scout with a turret, and deliver reconnaissance in a country of winding, treacherous roads. During the Normandy campaign and the fighting through the bocage, those dense hedgerows that turned progress into a series of ambushes, the Dingo's low silhouette and tight turning circle made it an ideal hedgerow infiltrator. Where other reconnaissance vehicles exposed wide profiles and attracted machine gun fire, the Dingo could tuck itself behind a row of earth, poke vision slits forward, and radio back with quiet authority. That ability to become literally unseen in the maze of the hedgerows was a survival advantage. The Dingo kept crews alive long enough to shape the advance of battalions behind them. Airborne doctrine also found a home for the Dingo. At Market Garden and in other airborne operations, its small size meant it could be carried in gliders. Airborne reconnaissance demanded machines that were both light and immediately useful once on the ground. The Dingo's simplicity and instant drivability made it suited to the task. It landed with the first waves, ready to run patrols and to give commanders on the ground the eyes they needed in a fluid, risky environment. Lieutenant Colonel Giles van der Allure, an Irish Guards officer, even found one suitable as a command vehicle, another sign that the Dingo's compact practicality could function in unforeseen roles when commanders needed a nimble headquarters on wheels. There are particular combat moments that illustrate the Dingo's strengths without drifting into myth. In one typical desert scenario, a patrol would push out under dawn light, spot enemy positions, and send back a concise picture before the enemy could react. When return gun flashes came, the Dingo didn't attempt to fight through. Crews would kick into reverse and vanish. Because they kept their frontal armor to the threat, they reduced the chance that mobility would be suddenly lost. In hedgerow country, a Dingo might simply slip between gaps, report an ambush, and lead infantry around a killing ground. In towns and on narrow roads, its ability to produce an armored facing while slipping backwards saved lives. None of these was invulnerability. Rather, they were repetitive patterns of tactical survival achieved by design and doctrine together. Comparing the Dingo to its contemporaries clarifies why its designers prioritized what they did. The German SDKF Z222 was a fast and nimble armored car, but it sat higher and often had an open-topped turret, which exposed observers and limited its stealth. The American M3A1 Scout Car boasted durability and troop-carrying capacity, but was larger and more visible. The Soviet VA-64 was a light and utilitarian machine, suited to mass production and rugged use. But again, the Dingo's combination of very low silhouette, a concentrated frontal armor scheme, and a near-silent transmission made it particularly adapted to the pure reconnaissance mission. British vehicles like the Humber offered other trade-offs, more protection or different roles. But where the mission demanded discreet observation and the ability to break contact quickly, the Dingo often outperformed larger, better-armed scouts. The British manufacturing effort around the Dingo is a story in resilience. Coventry did not stop because bombs fell. The Blitz dispersed production lines, moved workers and jigs to satellite sites, and forced a kind of modular, flexible manufacturing that actually increased the Dingo's resilience as a platform. The relatively simple engineering, few unnecessary parts, modular drive components, and a design that crews could strip and repair in the field, meant that logistics supported frontline needs even under stress. Crews were known to rebuild wrecks rather than wait for replacements, scavenging usable parts, and returning vehicles to service. That mechanical stubbornness translated into operational continuity. Units could maintain reconnaissance capacity when supply chains were under pressure. Numbers matter too. The 6,626 units produced represent a significant commitment of resources and reflect the British Army's judgment that the vehicle filled a critical niche. Far from being a curiosity, the Dameler Scout Car became a staple of armored reconnaissance units. Its post-war influence is visible in designs that followed. The Ferret armored car incorporated lessons learned from the Dingo's low profile and maneuverability, and Dingos themselves remained in service in various post-war contexts and in museums for visitors to study. The Italians even captured examples and produced local copies. The practical design invited replication. All this brings us back to the uncomfortable truth at the heart of the title's paradox. Why call a scout car a tank, and why call it slow? The word tank in this framing is a metaphor, an admission of effect rather than classification. The Dingo was not a tank in weight, armament, or role. It did not slug it out with enemy armor. But in its role, reconnaissance, its combination of stealth, protective frontal armor, mobility, and survivability made it functionally protective. It acted as a mobile shield for information-gathering teams, an armored outpost that could enter dangerous spaces, gather crucial intelligence, and then extract itself without being ground to pieces. Fortress in this sense is about protection for the mission and crew, rather than thickness of steel. And slow? That was often an ironic taunt. The Dingo was designed to be quick, both forward, capable of over 55 miles per hour, and backwards, able to retreat at up to around 40 miles per hour. Its apparent meekness on the factory floor belied a remarkable tactical speed and agility in the field. This machine's true genius was how deliberately its engineering served doctrine. The H-drive's flat belly, the fluid flywheel's smooth coupling, the pre-selector gearbox's instant gear selection, and the concentrated front armor were not random innovations. They were an integrated answer to the question, how do we gather information under fire and keep both the information and the people who collected it? By prioritizing low signature, quiet mobility, and directional protection, the Dameler Scout Car turned reconnaissance into a discipline with its own kind of armor, an armor of design, not of weight. It's worth stressing what the Dingo did not promise. It did not promise invulnerability. It did not claim to resist tank shells or overnight barrages. What it did promise, and repeatedly delivered, was survivability through concealment, mobility, and tactical doctrine. That is a different kind of unstoppable. Not the invincible behemoth that rams everything in its path, but a relentless, reliable tool that continually delivered the intelligence that let larger, heavier formations move with confidence. In several campaigns, the Dingo led columns into contested towns, scouted enemy dispositions that would have ambushed an unprepared force, and in numerous cases brought crews back alive where less thought-out machines would have been left in pieces. To stand in front of a Dameler Scout Car today, at a military museum or on a restored parade ground, is to see how deceptive size can be. Its lines are small, its interior is cramped, but the engineering is concentrated, thoughtful, and lethal in purpose, if not in munitions. The Dingo's legacy is practical. Lessons in matching mission to machinery, in industrial flexibility under bombardment, and in the sometimes underappreciated power of the reconnaissance soldier. When commanders needed eyes and the confidence that those eyes could return, they trusted the Dingo. If you like stories where clever engineering beats brute force, hit subscribe. When the war ended and historians began to sort the hardware, the Dingo's place became clear. It was not a headline-grabbing heavy tank painted in the grand strokes of armored lore. It was a technician's favorite and a soldier's quiet ally. Its design informed later light-armored cars, its production taught lessons about dispersed wartime industry, and its surviving examples now sit quietly in museums, small, unassuming, and yet unmistakably proud. So why call it an unstoppable fortress against German lines? Because in the arithmetic of reconnaissance, what counts is not how much metal you carry, but how effectively you can move, hide, gather, and escape. On countless patrols, in deserts and hedgerows, on glider landings and narrow mountain tracks, the Dameler Scout Car performed that arithmetic better than most. It kept crews alive, denied the enemy easy observation, and gave commanders the timely intelligence to maneuver with confidence. That is how a vehicle no taller than a man's shoulder earned the reputation of being, in its own domain, unstoppable. If you want more deep dives into W2 vehicles and how engineering shaped outcomes, watch our video on the German SDKF Z222 next, or visit your local military museum. There's probably a Dingo waiting to surprise you with how much purpose can fit into a tiny frame.